Here.
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 Mayor Dennis McBride,
Here.
Ms. Joanne Sabir,
Here.
Representative Joe Sanfilippo, Ms. Aicha Sawa,
Here.
Mr. Omar Sheikh,
Here.
Alderwoman Jocasta Zamaripa.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Great, thank you, Michael. First order of business is any discussion and the approval of the meeting minutes from our previous board meeting in, I believe that would have been September. Do I have a motion for approval?
Approval.
Do I have a second?
Second, Senator Johnson.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, great. The meeting minutes are approved. Next order of business, Steve Marsh for our financial report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. Before we get into the budget presentation today, a couple of quick updates on 2021 financial activity. Number one, the district received some very favorable news earlier this week in which Moody's rating agency upgraded the district's bond rating outlook to stable from negative. Marty and I, along with our bond finance team, had met with Moody's last week in preparation for the potential upcoming debt refinancing transaction that the board authorized at the September board meeting. If you recall, the district's rating outlook was downgraded to negative in May of 2020, shortly after the pandemic began, and has remained at that level for the past 18 months. A factor that positively influenced Moody's outlook upgrade was the active role management has taken to mitigate the impact the pandemic has had on district finances. Management is extremely proud of this upgrade, which could not have been possible without the trust and support of this board to endorse the recommendations we made over the past year and a half. While it remains uncertain at this point how this upgrade may affect the upcoming bond transaction, we certainly view this as recognition by the debt markets of the considerable progress we've made as an organization to overcome the challenges that the pandemic has presented to us. So it's very good news indeed. As for the timing of the refinancing transaction itself, we continue to advance the timeline. It's very possible we could be pricing the deal with potential investors as soon as next week and perhaps closing before the Thanksgiving holiday. But we'll certainly keep the board apprised of any meaningful progress towards that end. The second update, we've initiated a few more draws from the project fund for the expansion project since our last board meeting update, which is consistent with the cash flow schedule provided to our board members. We'll look to update the board quarterly on the status of the project fund with similar exhibits that we provided in September. So you could expect the next update sometime in December. If there's any questions on the debt refinancing transaction or the project fund, please don't hesitate to reach out to me or Marty. As for 2021 numbers, I'll keep it brief today and direct your attention to page 9 of the board packet. This is the income statement with column IDs M, N, O, and P at the top, and provides a comparison of the last forecast we provided to the board in August relative to our forecast today. Scrolling down to line 67, column O, you can see that our year-end forecast has improved by about $250K. There's not any one single line item that's driving this variance, but rather plenty of puts and takes up and down the income statement. We adjusted our entertainment forecast, which is driving the movement in line items 1 through 12 and also 15 through 27. We removed from projections a few events that postponed, including Disney Princesses and Peppa Pig, events that we were expecting to host into our theater. But we've also restated some of our net income numbers up related to the Van Gogh event. And even with that restatement, I think we're a bit light in this category, so we could show further improvement by year end as a result. Tax revenues, lines 30 through 35, show no change from our previously established forecast, but that is an assumption that we may need to consider revising up in time for our next board update. As this board is aware from previous updates, our actual returns in the months of May, June, and July have modestly exceeded our revised forecast numbers that we put together in January. But our position has been to keep the year-end forecast static to guard against fourth quarter uncertainty. This past week, we received the August returns, and they substantially exceeded our forecast numbers. This is certainly great news, and we're expecting additional good news in September, driven in large part by increased hotel occupancy due to the Ryder Cup and Summerfest. We continue to remain guarded about fourth quarter numbers, but are very pleased with the year-to-date results thus far. Line 36, we lowered interest income projections based on year-to-date results. Line 39, Bucks District ticket surcharge is a bit lower. Our previous forecast included a few events at the Fiserv that have since postponed, including the Alan Jackson concert previously scheduled for this past September. Moving down into non-operating expenses, you can see we're beginning to adjust some of these categories based on year-to-date results. Our thought here is that there could be some more positive variance that we realize in these categories before year end, but right now we're keeping some of the projections a bit on the conservative side. On to page 10 and 11, the restricted and unrestricted cash positions. Both balances remain relatively healthy, and management has no concerns about meeting its near-term obligations over the next 12 months. The positive changes in the net income statement have modestly increased the year-end unrestricted cash position. Are there any questions on 2021 before we jump into the budget? Okay, on to the budget. This, I think, is the third straight week that Marty and I have presented the budget to board members. Consistent with past practice from prior years, earlier this month, Marty and I began having individual meetings with members of the Finance Committee to review the process and assumptions we use to develop the budget. Those meetings are incredibly valuable to me and Marty, and we thank the Finance Committee for the time they've put into this process and the feedback and recommendations they provided. Last week, the budget was reviewed in open session at both the Finance and Governance Committee meetings, and the Finance Committee passed a motion recommending adoption of the budget by the full board today. I think it's fair to say that the budget has been well vetted before coming into today's meeting. So following my comments today, and after answering any questions the board members may have, we will ask the board for a motion to adopt the 2022 budget. So what are the highlights of the budget? Well, number one, event activity is expected to approach levels that we saw in 2019. Number two, year-over-year net income before depreciation is expected to grow by 40%. Number three, investments in infrastructure, personnel, and systems critical to sustaining and growing the business are nearing pre-pandemic levels. Number four, the restricted reserve balance, which is the account that we use to fund our debt service, is expected to grow by almost $1 million. Number five, while the unrestricted balance will show a net year-over-year decrease in cash, will be positioned to enter 2023 free and clear of payment deferments that we've made to Levy and Visit Milwaukee during the pandemic. This budget is not a layup for the district. There's some stretch here, and it's going to require the best efforts of the district to achieve these goals. And the leadership team that Marty has assembled in his tenure here at the district, along with the recalibration in 2019 of our core values, which are simply summarized and symbolized in our three favorite letters at the district, right, Marty? B, P, X.
Sounds good.
I mean, we are well poised to not only achieve this budget, but to successfully leverage unexpected opportunities as they become available. In terms of personnel, culture, and a shared purpose, the district has never been in a better position to achieve more. So to the budget exhibits, let's look at page 14 of your board packet, which is the event mix summary. You'll see the total budgeted event activity, column A, line 24, is fairly close to the activity levels that we saw in 2019, which is column H. We're about 94% of that total. But more importantly, only 7% of the operating revenues driven by this budgeted event activity comes from blue sky events, which are events that have not yet been booked, but will be booked in the year for the year. That means 93% of our net operating income is driven by events that either have a signed contract, confirmed booking, or a strong date hold on our building calendars. We view this budget event mix as low risk to the district. In terms of the income statement, which is pages 15 and 16 of your packets, the event mix is critical to growing our net income, which, as previously mentioned, is expected to grow by year over year by approximately 40%, as noted on line 67, column D. And just as an aside, we are deviating a bit from our standard income statement in that we're separating the expansion debt from the rest of our normal non-operating expenses. As we've gone through this budget process, we've continually compared ourselves to fiscal year 2019, which was the best year for the district in terms of net income. Having the expansion debt in 22 as part of a non-operating expense really muddied the comparison between the years, so we thought it helpful to separate out that expense, include it below the line along with depreciation. So you can see it as line 68 there. It still rolls into our final net income number on line 71. As you look at the comparisons between 22 and 19, especially in the top line operating revenues, lines 1 through 13, you'll notice we're not quite back to pre-pandemic levels. In fact, we're only 82% of the way there. While I mentioned that event activity closely resembles 19 in terms of number of events, we're assuming less revenue per event due to reduced attendance levels at our events. You'll also notice similar disparities in 22 and 19 in key non-operating revenue categories such as tax revenues, which are lines 30 through 35, and Bucks District Ticket Surcharge revenue, line 39. Again, these categories represent about 82 to 83% of 19 activity. And to be clear, a recovery that has us at 82% of 19 levels is positive, incremental progress, and it has us building towards a full recovery by 23. However, as 22 unfolds, we'll need to closely monitor our margins as key expense categories such as wages, line 15, utilities, line 18, repairs and maintenance, line 26, and salaries, line 42, are near or exceeding levels seen in 19, which means less net income flows to the bottom. There's less room for error with this budget, and as stated before, management will need to take a very active role to ensure it's achieved. Overall, management is pleased with the position of the income statement for 22. It shows meaningful growth over 21 and provides a stable foundation to achieve full recovery by 23. Moving on to the 22 capital budget, pages 17 and 18. You can see here the list is pretty substantial. As was the case last year, the senior management team got together over the course of 3 separate meetings to discuss and decision potential capital expenditure projects. We segmented proposed capital expenditures into 3 tiers, with Tier A, which is what this exhibit is comprised of, being projects that deal with life safety, building functionality, code compliance, and contractual obligations. You can see our CapEx spend in 22 is projected to be about $2.4 million, which is about $900K more than 21. While a modest year-over-year increase, this is still below our target of $3 to $3.5 million that we'd like to see in a year to limit future deferred maintenance on district infrastructure. Like the income statement, the budget again shows positive incremental growth and a stepping stone towards a more robust CapEx budget in 23. The last 2 pages in the packet, pages 19 and 20, are the budget cash flow projections. One exhibit for restricted revenues, one exhibit for unrestricted revenues. Starting with the restricted cash flow, the news is positive, largely a result of the bond transaction that was executed in June of 2020. By year end, we're projecting to grow that reserve balance by about $1 million to get to a total of just over $22 million. Pre-pandemic, getting to a reserve number of this magnitude was a goal that Marty and I had set out to achieve to limit the financial risk a future economic downturn would present to the district in terms of meeting its debt service obligations. If you recall, in 18 and in 2019, the balance in this account was closer to $8 million. Our starting balance in 2022 would fund our entire debt service for the upcoming year, even if we didn't collect another dollar of tax revenue. Management believes this fund is in a very strong position. As we grow and as hopefully this balance grows, we'll be considering options of how to best use this reserve, including paying down existing debt or applying towards capital projects. Either way, it does provide the district some flexibility in terms of long-term strategic planning. As for the unrestricted revenues, which is page 19, line number 1 is where we expect the cash balance to be as of January 1st, which corresponds to the ending cash balance for 2021, which we just reviewed as part of the forecast update. I'm sorry, this is page 20, excuse me. Line 25 is where we expect the cash balance to be as of December 31st, 2022. and line 24 is the net change for the year. And you can see that's a decrease of about $4.6 million. We compared this cash flow projection to the one we presented to the board last year at this time. And two things stood out to me. Number one, we're expecting to end the year with more money in the bank than what we had budgeted in 2021, which is about $500,000. And number two, the estimated net change in cash has improved substantially from a negative $8 million cash outflow to negative $4.6 million in 2022. We're also seeing some of the effects of the mitigation strategies take hold in 22 related to the pandemic. And this was a point that I was making in my opening remarks. We're paying down an additional $1.9 million to visit Milwaukee that was deferred from 2020 that we wouldn't otherwise expect to see in a normal budget year. And we're paying down an offset to Levy in 2022, totaling about $500,000, which was otherwise owed to them from 2020. We're certainly not running from these obligations. Rather, we look forward to fulfilling them, but it is a drain on our cash balance, which as a result doesn't fully reflect the positive news from the income statement. By year-end 22, these obligations will be fulfilled, and we'll fully realize the profitability of 23 in the cash flow statement next year. At this point in time, we're not overly concerned about the cash balance and are cautiously optimistic that this could improve throughout the year, so we'll be able to capitalize on unexpected opportunities as they present themselves. I literally start every day looking at the district's cash position, so I, along with Marty, will be closely monitoring these accounts. That was a fairly high level walkthrough of our budget. This is a budget that we're proud of. It will be challenging to meet and ideally beat, but does not introduce material risk to the district's financial position. Mr. Chairman, that is my presentation.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Well done. Are there any questions for Steve or anything anyone needs to add?
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead. Senator
Thank you.
Darling.
I'm very impressed with what you've presented. You talk about the cash to prepare for any downturn, which I think is very smart. What's your projection for the next several years in terms of the economy? Not just the business here, but the economy.
Thank you, Senator, for the question. In terms of tax revenues, which is really what funds that restricted reserve balance, that rainy day fund is what we call it for debt
We do
service.
too at the state.
We expect that to grow 20% in terms of collections over the next year and a half, and then start to level out more to a 4 to 5% over the next 4 to 5 years, and 3% thereafter is our projection. So it's enough to cover our debt service and incrementally grow that fund year over year to give us a bigger cushion as we move forward.
I think that's very good, but what is your expectation for the economy in general? What do you base a lot of this off?
The macroeconomic growth projections?
Yes, right.
Yeah, we've been reviewing reports that are more specific to the hotel industry in the city. We've relied a little bit on the HVS report that was provided to us in 2020 in advance of our debt offering last year. We've reviewed data from the tourism, I'm going to butcher the name here, I think the tourism economics forecast and the STAR reports, and their projections are similar in terms of hotel growth to what we're showing on the tax revenue side.
So you based your projections on those macro?
In part, oh yeah, of course, yes.
Yeah.
We are very much affected by the macro economy here, but we try to narrow in more
Right.
on local projections as well
Yeah,
when
thank
we
you.
talk about tax revenue.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Senator Darling, anything else? Good.
That's fine.
Anything else anyone needs to add or has questions for Steve or Marty? Right, if not, I think I would entertain a motion for approval of the budget. Thank you, Bob. Galen, thank you. All in favor of approval of the budget for 2022, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any opposed? Great. That is approval for the 2022 budget. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, the next agenda item here is a resolution that authorizes management to draw down funds held in trust for capital maintenance expenditures. This is a resolution that we present to the board each year. The fund grows 3% each year and is funded by unrestricted tax revenues. But in order to access the funds to fund our capital expenditure budget that we just reviewed, it requires a resolution by the board. So that is the purpose of the resolution in today's packet.
Right, and this is something that we do, I believe, every year.
Yes,
As
we present the budget.
As we
this is,
present the
part of
budget,
that
so-
process.
entertain a motion for approval of this resolution?
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
So what is the current balance in the reserve?
Scott, by year end, that balance will be up to $1.2 million. At the start of this calendar year, we drew down $1.17 million. And throughout the course of the year, that bucket, so to speak, fills up with unrestricted tax funds. And once it reaches the 1.2, specifically $1,209,191, the excess is sent to the district as part of our quarterly tax distributions. So this is fixed by the general resolution that governs the tax revenues and the trustees' responsibilities around tax revenue.
So you will have $1,209,000 in the account?
That's correct. And come January of '22, we'll send a letter to our trustee requesting they distribute those funds to us for the purpose of funding capital expenditures.
So is that peeled off from your financials?
If you look at the cash flow projection, Scott, which is page, the unrestricted cash flow projections, page 20, you'll see on line number 10, a line item called capital maintenance funds. You'll see the inflow of 1.2 million in January, and then the outflow in December of 1.245, and that represents the unrestricted tax revenues used to fill that account back up.
Okay. Okay, so this is just a natural process of the original agreements?
That's correct, Scott.
Okay, so I'll move approval.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Resolution is approved. Are there any other questions for Steve about the financials or the budget? All right, great. We'll move over to Marty and have our CEO report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, board members. Thank you all for attending, both in person and virtually. I would like to first start off in thanking you for approving the budget, but more importantly for the rest of the staff at the district. This will be the first night later this evening that Mr. Marsh will be able to sleep, and that will make our performance in the office increase as we get into next week and he's back to a stable, as best we can expect, individual. The event activity for the balance of 2021 and 22 is looking very positive. Since the September board meeting, the sales department has booked 17 new events, of which 7 will occur this year, and the remaining 10 in the first 8 months of 2022. 11 of those events will be in the Wisconsin Center, 5 in the Miller High Life Theater, and 1 in the Panther Arena. As of this morning, ticket sales for Beyond Van Gogh were over 157,000 tickets, and we continue to be on a pace of selling more than 4,700 new tickets every 7 days. 2 weeks ago, we announced that the exhibit has been extended now a second time through January 9th of 2022. As part of the extension, we're happy to have it playing through the Thanksgiving and New Year's holidays, and we are actively looking to sell access to the exhibition along with catering packages for companies, organizations, and individuals for their holiday parties. So just a great opportunity to continue the event, but also gives us a unique sales opportunity to package access to the exhibit along with organizations' holiday parties while being in a very safe, spaced-out environment. We are working closely with Peggy Williams-Smith and Visit Milwaukee and other city officials in trying to find out more information about the Republican National Convention. Peggy is going to D.C. next week, along with several members of her organization and representatives of the Republican Party, to find out what exactly is needed from the city. So this is a very exciting opportunity for all of us. We were thrilled to be awarded the DNC for last year, and while the mayor has received an invitation to respond to the Democratic National Convention, we're taking the same opportunity to find out more information about the Republican National Convention, and we'll make a determination whether or not we proceed with that event. As far as the expansion, at the end of my report, I'm going to ask Mike Abrams to come up and share some more information with you, but just some top-level information I'd like to share. Hopefully by now you've all been informed that the official groundbreaking ceremony is 9 a.m. next Thursday. You are all invited. Members of the board, we are reserving seats in the first 2 rows for you, so we ask that when you arrive, please go to the front of the setup. And at the end of the prepared comments, there will be a photo opportunity that we'd like you all to participate in. More information about the specifics will be coming to you early next week. If you've not taken the opportunity to take a look at it, at our buildingmore.com website, we have activated a live webcam that allows you to access what's going on live at the convention center, looking at the point of view, looking south from on top of the Miller High Life Theater. Last Wednesday, I distributed to the board a peer city comparison document that was prepared by Visit Milwaukee and the district. Peggy Williams-Smith and I have had several discussions since the September board meeting regarding comments and concerns by several of the board members about a new agreement. And really what seemed to be a real point of concern was the term that Peggy and I had been talking about and had agreed to in the document. In very healthy discussion subsequent to the September board meeting, Peggy and I have modified the term of the agreement to reflect 4 years, not 5, while all other terms and conditions that were in the document we shared with you on September 10th remain the same. On behalf of the district, I wholeheartedly endorse the agreement that we've reached. I think our partnership with Visit Milwaukee has significantly improved, as I've shared with you in the past several meetings. And at this point, Mr. Chairman, I am seeking approval from the board to enable me to enter into final discussions and finalize an agreement with Visit Milwaukee with terms no less favorable to the district than those that were presented in the September 10th document.
So moved.
Do we have a second? All in favor of approval of the Visit Milwaukee contract as presented by Marty, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Great. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank the board once again for your support of our recommendations to you. I truly respect all of the questions that have been expressed to us over the past several months. We do take your input very seriously. We feel we have a real obligation to represent your interests. So when there are opposing viewpoints, we really look forward to hearing them and hopefully together are able to come up with solutions that make the direction we're taking one that everyone is supportive of. So thank you very much for this. I'd like to now ask Mike Abrams to come up and give you a brief update on where we are with the expansion.
Good morning, Board. Marty said, just real quick update here. I know there's a lot of items on the agenda to get to. Making really good progress out on the site. If you guys have been in and around the property, we continue with foundation removals, excavation of the site, and steel pile surveying activities. The north-south section of the sky bridge that connected into the center has been demoed. The portion that spans across Velar Phillips is planned to come down in the next several weeks, so we're still planning for that. And the real large soffit that is underneath the old staff parking area where many of you guys have parked in the past, that has to get removed And the utilities and infrastructure up above that soffit all gets cleared out in preparation for the new concrete decks that are planned for the winter. So that work is also coming up in the next few months. We continue to plan for a new temporary large wall that we are building inside the exhibit hall, just on the north side of the building. The precast concrete wall that is visible on the north side of the structure comes down over the winter. So we have about 6 weeks of work inside the exhibit hall D. You're starting in early December. Our second drawing bid package is out for bid right now with concrete, steel, and vertical transportation scopes. We will be receiving those bids back mid-November. And then we have 3 final construction document packages that come out on the project. One in mid-December for the enclosure part of the building, the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing scopes in mid-January, and then our finished package, everything that's interior to the project, comes out in late spring of '22. Mid-November also is another milestone for the construction. We are mobilizing 4 steel pile drilling rigs, and we have roughly 2,800 steel piles on this project. So we're going to have 4 rigs going at one time. It's about a 3-month process over the winter. And we continue to have design meetings throughout the next 7 months or so to get us to that final interior bid package. So we're continuing to meet with Marty and his team on everything from artwork, signage, interior finishes. We have that water feature element at the front entrance that we continue to have meetings on. And then just the site work portion, the landscaping, site lighting, and security elements for the exterior. Lastly, we have 2 scheduled city meetings coming up, one with the City Planning Commission on the 8th of November, and we are waiting to hear if we are on the agenda for the November 10th Public Works meeting, but we anticipate that. That is specifically for the 4 air rights locations that we have on this project. So I just want to give a quick update. That's it. If anybody has any questions.
Mike, how many piles did you say?
2,800. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
And I know it's all surrounded by hotels.
Yep.
What time are they going to start in the morning?
7 a.m. is the planned start. Typically about 3 to 4 o'clock is
Do you have any idea how
busy.
deep you're going to?
Roughly 50 feet.
Great.
Yeah.
On 3 months.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Anything else from Mike? Good, Mike, thank you.
Thank you.
Before we get to the next order of business, I did want to express a congratulatory message to Aicha. I know you're not here, but the birth of your baby girl 2 weeks ago, so I want to publicly acknowledge that, and maybe you're getting this meeting in between some nap times or sleeping times for your new daughter. So thank you for being here after that just 2 weeks ago, so congrats again.
Thank you. She was actually being fussy, so I had to get up for a second.
Did she vote on that last action we had?
Yeah, she was crying pretty loud.
Great. With that said, we do have one more thing we do need to vote on, and it's actually the election of our officer positions. And as it relates to the officers, as reported to the Governance Committee last week, the following members have expressed their interest in continuing to serve as officers at the WCD. Chairman, myself. Vice Chairman, Grady Crosby. Treasurer, Greg Marcus. And Secretary, Mark Flaherty. With no other interest expressed, I'd like to present this group as a slate for approval by the board, and I would ask for a motion to approve the group of officers as for the board for next year.
So moved.
Thank you.
I'll second. Brennan?
All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Great, motion carries. And thanks to Grady, Mark, and Greg for continuing to serve in those officer positions. All right, I will turn it over to Steve actually for an introduction for our next guest on just an update on our city pension.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As the board is aware, the district participates in the City of Milwaukee pension plan. Every 2 weeks, eligible district employees contribute towards that plan in the form of a payroll deduction. Additionally, the district itself makes an annual contribution to that plan, and that's estimated to be approximately $450,000 in 2022, but that's expected to double in 2023, driven by the immediate solvency challenges that plan faces. At the request of Alderman Bauman, Dennis Yacarino, the City of Milwaukee Budget Director, is here today to give the board a brief overview of the state of the city's pension plan.
Good morning. Like it was said, I'm Dennis Yacarino. I'm the City of Milwaukee Budget Director, and I wanted to run you through a few quick charts. What I did want to start off with is, for those that don't know what our city budget looks like, these are some of the numbers. The overall budget's $1.7 billion, and then we narrow it down into more of the operating pieces with the tax levy supported budget. The general purpose budget, that's where all of our departments show up that are on the tax levy. The tax levy that we're proposing for 2022 is $305.2 million. And I just wanted to show you some of our other non-tax levy. Those enterprise funds includes like the water department, our sewer fund, and items like that. This shows you where we get our sources for the tax levy supported portion of our budget. As you can see, a lot of it comes from the property taxes themselves, intergovernmental revenues, user charges, and that makes up really more than half of what the city's budget is funded with. This is what we spend it on. You can see the majority of the funding goes to city departments, then a little bit to capital and debt service. You can see the little pie so far on pensions, but that's going to increase significantly as we move forward. This is how the departments are funded. So I wanted to show you that a majority of our funding does go to the police department and the fire department and public works. That makes up about 78% of our budget. So the majority does go to the police department. We have a significant amount of staffing. We're looking at funding roughly the equivalent of 1,657 officers next year, which will be down a little bit from 2021. Wanted to show you this because here's one of our challenges that we face. If you can remember the chart that shows the percentages of the budget that are made up of these two revenues, they make up about 45%. The one line is flat, is state shared revenue. Obviously, it does cause a challenge to us to deal with a roughly $219 million revenue that doesn't increase at all per year. The tax levy is somewhat limited by state law, but we try to use whatever we can there. So you can see what the growth in the levy has been the last few years there. I just want to put a pitch out that we normally put a pitch out, that I hope the state could find it in their heart to give us a little bit more money. We see their revenues have been increasing over time. We would hope that they would relieve some of the pressure that's caused by the $20 million reduction we had in shared revenue and expenditure restraint program revenue. Okay, now I'll go into the pensions. I think in part you're going to see some of these same issues moving into 2023. So the increases are likely on a percentage basis to affect you in this manner. Currently, the pension contribution is about 72.9. We have been putting in about 8 million into our pension reserves. So we are trying to deal with the growth by hopefully smoothing out the problem by continuing to build up reserves. We hope to have a $52 million reserve by 2023 that will help us hopefully smooth out the levy impact of all of this. But our pension contribution for the employer is likely to increase to $149.5 million, $76.6 million increase. And where we stand today is, this is just the city numbers, so it'll be a little different than you may see in the overall report for pensions for your side. But the UAAL is 1.1 billion. The funded ratio last report was 80%. I can tell you though, the market's done very well this year, so we're sitting a lot better. I think we're in the mid 80s now. So pray that continues. That will help us a lot moving forward. This is what our payments look like, so you can kind of see the magnitude. And if you can remember, the levy was 305 million that we're shooting for. So a 70-something million dollar increase is a large percentage increase that we're going to face. And definitely we wouldn't be able to do that fully on the levy because of levy restrictions. This is what we are going to try to do to fund this. Like I said, we do have a $52 million reserve fund that we plan on utilizing. We will utilize a significant amount in the first year, but that still gets us a levy increase somewhere in the $40 million range. We obviously then, because we use 40 million, we have a lot less available the next year. So that would leave us roughly with a 35 or so levy increase in 2024. And you can see the other increases moving forward to eventually it stabilizes pretty much in 2026. This is what we might be looking at if nothing happens. We'd be looking at this level of position cuts. I did this as equivalents. Now, other cuts are possible. I don't want to make it sound like this is the only way to deal with the budget, but a majority of our budget, probably 85%, is made up of position wages and fringe benefits. So we have little choice of where to go on positions. So this is where we would be likely looking at positions. Now, I used the average wage. I did not use a slighted wage or minimize the wage. So it is an average, but we're looking at over 1,300 positions that we might have to reduce. What are we going to try to do about it? There are several steps. Many of you might have seen the pension task force report that lists a number of options. But right now what we're doing is we're trying to work with the state to look at some solutions to the pension that would helpfully smooth this out for us. The other piece we are also looking at is working with the police and fire unions to try to negotiate changes that could change perhaps the employee contribution, as well as look at a type of system like the Wisconsin retirement system. Why bring up the Wisconsin retirement system? There's a lot of benefits there for us from the city standpoint. A lot of the positive is that there's no built-in liability really for cost of living. Right now, our pensions build in cost of living at a certain rate per year, so they become fixed. The state plan is built on how well the fund does. So if we could bring our new employees into that, we should get some savings over time. The problem with that scenario is that it does take time before that all starts to filter through. We need to be replacing employees over time, and that does help in the long term. We may also need some help with how we amortize the soft close of the fund in the first scenario. And in the second, we just, the big piece will be trying to negotiate some higher employee contributions. And that ends my presentation. I tried to keep it short.
How much was the city given? What was it, like 400 million?
Oh, sure. I can go into a little of that. Yeah, the city's going to get about 400 million. There are some restrictions on what we can use it for. There is a component in components that we can use it to help us with our budget overall. And we are trying to do that. There is a proposal to try to use it in a way that would free up 30 more million that we put in our pension reserve account. But the bill itself for the rescue plan says that we cannot use it for pensions directly. So we are trying to find ways to do, hopefully nobody from the federal government is in the room, but we are trying to find ways to utilize the funds so we can free up some dollars to help us with pensions. But what I want to make clear with this, though, is that is help to get us maybe a few more years. It'll buy us some, but it's really the structural problems that we...
No, I understand.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
Yeah, Dennis, a couple of questions. A lot of the folks in this room are in the hospitality business, own properties, businesses in downtown Milwaukee, other neighborhoods across the city. Does your scenario that's been painted here contemplate the actual layoff of sworn police and firefighters?
I'm not sure exactly what mix the city would decide on, but obviously the police is a large cost to our pension system as well as our budget. The police and fire sworn make up about 80% of our costs in our pension system, just so you can understand the magnitude. So definitely, if we're making reductions, we have to look at sworn personnel. I'm not sure what the mix will necessarily be because there's a lot of factors that the city will face on what services we would retain, but yes, it's likely that they'll be affected.
And in this year's budget, you mentioned the executive budget proposed a sworn strength of 1,657, which is a decline of 25 from the current authorized strength, which is a decline of 180 over the last 3 or 4 years, if I'm not mistaken. But that assumes that the council will approve a budget amendment in the next 2 weeks that spends $6.2 million to fund 3 classes of 195.
Well, I'm confident that our budget will go as quickly as the Wisconsin Center did today, and we'll meet for 20 minutes and we'll be done. So I believe you would follow all my recommendations. So no, it is possible. We are talking about hiring 195 officers next year. Really, on the average strength, it's the timing of those classes. Our information from our Fire and Police Commission is that we can only hold 3 classes next year, so we are restrained also by the number of classes we can have. Turnover has been significant. A lot of retirements are occurring. I don't know if you recall from in the 90s, there was a lot of funding for police officers, and officers can retire roughly around their 25th year. So we're seeing a lot of retirements from classes that were held in the 90s. So that's what's driving some of our numbers. And the other issue is really how fast can we fill those positions. We are trying to look to see if there's a possibility to get the 25 officers back so we don't lose ground. However, I know this will be a topic of discussion with the council as we move forward.
So if that budget amendment is not approved by the council, then that 1,657 would actually be reduced by 195, is that correct?
Actually, on average, it would be reduced by about 120.
Okay, so there's a real possibility of a significant reduction in sworn police staff for 2022, and then, of course, it gets even worse after that in terms of the pension contribution driving actual layoffs of current police officers, not just a decision not to hire new ones.
Right,
Correct.
that's a high possibility, yes.
So I think it's very important for folks to know around here that given the significant increases in crime and reckless driving and other concerns we have, if people think law enforcement is a tool to address those, there will be less of that tool going forward. Now, I know it's debatable as to the degree to which law enforcement is perceived as the solution to these crime and public safety issues. I personally think it's part of the solution, but to the extent people believe law enforcement is part of the solution, that resource will be diminished without, almost inevitably, basically unless some of the reforms that you discussed, primarily a sales tax, is authorized. Is that correct?
Right, it will be tough to avoid future police reductions if we have to face the pension issue ourselves.
Okay. Just for folks' edification, what is the deal sworn fire and police have regarding retirement? Is it correct that if they start as a police cadet at age 18, they can retire with full benefits at age 42?
We have changed that. It depends where you are now when you were hired. If you were hired a long time ago, you can retire at 45 for a police officer, assuming you start roughly at 18 or so, because we do not, or excuse me, 21, because we do not count the, if you are a police aide anymore as a year of service.
Okay.
So it is a little later, I believe it's 46. Firefighters at one point could retire at 49 years. We did raise the ages. I know police now are at the age of 50, but they're at 25 years of service and 50. Firefighters are a little bit higher than that. I want to say like 52. But the benefits are higher. I should note for all of you that our sworn personnel do not receive Social Security benefits. So in part, that's why they are a little bit higher. So I don't want to sound like I'm just talking negatively about police or fire, because there is some costs that we need to pick up because they don't get that benefit.
Okay.
Thank you. Well, anybody else have any questions?
Just a
Omar,
quick
please.
question. Thank you for your presentation, very insightful. Do you know, so we have about 1,650 sworn for Milwaukee. Our peer cities, do you know what that average is, sworn officers? I hear Baltimore is similar and has about 2,800 sworn.
Yeah, Baltimore, I know, has a lot more. I know we looked at about 10 cities and we're roughly in the middle. I could send that over to Steve, and maybe he could distribute that to you, because we have looked at that.
Well, Mr. Chair.
We're somewhere in the middle.
That is a very good question, because, of course, if you say, well, we need X, it begs the question, well, what is the appropriate amount?
Right.
What is the proper ratio, officers per capita, officers per 100,000 population, whatever the case may be? I mean, comparison to other cities may or may not be relevant. It's useful. We are actually undertaking a consulting study, correct, to examine that exact question?
Right. We are in the process of hiring a firm that should tell us what a reasonable staffing level would be for the city.
Okay.
And hopefully that will be done within about 6 months from now.
Thank you. Are there other, obviously, yeah, go ahead, Mark, please.
I just, maybe, and I think Omar would agree with me, that things are deteriorating downtown.
Yep.
With cars with no license plates blowing through red lights. We've had more in our place, in our hotel. We've had a lot of problem disruptive people coming in, and it's just becoming a big problem. If we don't solve it, it's going to get worse. And you agree, Omar?
Yeah, no, it was a scary last year, you know, and I always try to celebrate the successes. There are a lot of good things that are happening, but, you know, I had employees walking back out to their car where they've snatched purses, and I've known other people held at gunpoint going to Bucks games. So, you know, I'd like to think that, you know, the bid in downtown district generates a lot of tax income, and so it's a scary time for us. And so the thought of losing officers is very scary to us.
What about the 400 million? Why can't you?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. That we have been debating the allocation of half that money. The money is coming to the city in 2 batches. So we did just decide, yesterday in fact, on the allocation of basically 187 million of that. We had authorized some other expenditures earlier. Yesterday was 174, but in total we were dealing with 187 million. And there was initially a proposal to use 6 million of the American Rescue Plan money to hire these 195 police officers. There was resistance by members of the council to using the federal funds for that purpose. Why was there resistance? Because there was considerable resistance in the community among activists and other organizations who were adamant that we should not use these federal funds for police. And enough council members agreed with that sentiment, and so that was taken out of the rescue plan allocation. That means unless we put it back in the budget through a budget amendment, which will be considered next Thursday for final council consideration of the full budget 2 weeks from today, unless that money is put back in, we will not hire 195 officers, which means that 1657 will decline by approximately 120. The chief has indicated via a letter, which I'm happy to share with anyone that wants a copy of it. He was asked to prepare a letter. Well, what would you do if you did not have those 195 officers? And he laid it out very specifically. And the 2 things that would directly affect downtown, number 1, he would eliminate District 1 as a separate police district, and he would eliminate the horse patrol. Now, some might say, well, what good is the horse patrol anyway? Well, the horse patrol, as it turns out, is a very effective crowd control mechanism that was deployed for some of the mass gatherings at the Deer District, some of the mass gatherings on Water Street, and the like. So those are just a couple of examples of what, so I can't predict what the outcome will be at this point. It could be a very close vote, and it's possible that a majority of the council votes against the budget. And under our budget rules, if the council fails to approve the budget, the mayor's executive budget automatically becomes the budget. And that executive budget does not now contain those 195 police officers. So if the council votes against approving the budget passed last year 9-6, if I'm not mistaken, maybe 8-7. If it does not, if it is not approved, the executive budget automatically becomes the budget, and that budget does not contain funding for the 195 police. So the the actions that the chief says he'll have to take will probably be taken as a result. Dennis, is that correct?
Yes. I can tell you, though, that the administration will be definitely lobbying hard to retain those positions. That's where the mayor is.
Thank you. I think, obviously, it's a very, very important discussion. Thank you for the information. Obviously, to the Center District, police and fire are very vital to the safety and security of everything we have going on here, as well as, myself having a entity downtown as well, safety and security
Jim?
with others. Yeah, go ahead.
It's Joe Brennan. I just one issue, and I know we're probably getting short on time. I just wanted to make sure that people are aware that at the, and I know there's a lot of discussion about the immediate and the use of the ARPA funds, but for Mark's Hotels or Omar's Restaurants or lots of other people, we expect them to be around 50 years from now. And so, longer, more sustainable funding opportunities for the city are something also that I think need to be explored, and Dennis talked a little bit about that. I just want to make sure people are aware that in the previous, in his two budgets, the governor has offered up and has proposed an increase in state shared revenue in both of those budgets. In the most recent budget, the governor proposed that municipalities over the size of 30,000 have an opportunity through referendum to increase sales tax by 0.5%. Those are things that were removed by members of the legislature without there being any vote on it. There has been at least a hearing. I know that the city of Milwaukee has participated in, but for people who are on this board and who are invested, engaged in the community, I'm not only on the board, I not only patronize restaurants and hotels, but I live in the community. And so all those issues you're talking about related to violence, things are like on the streets, those are things I feel viscerally and personally, but all of us have a responsibility, and there's a longer term issue to be discussed and debated. And so whether it's the members of the legislature who are on the district board, who I think feel, in some ways, have some of the same concerns, there are ways that the state legislature and the administration can work to do some longer term benefit for these things. I don't want people to lose sight of that, because that's an issue that the city of Milwaukee is going to have to be addressing for the next several years. But the over-reliance on property tax is something that goes back a generation, and we have opportunities, we have levers that we can push on this. And so I would invite anybody who is interested in continuing to be part of that discussion to reach out to me or to be part of those conversations moving forward.
Great, thank you, Secretary Brennan. One last top, Omar and then Bob, and then, sorry, yeah.
I want to.
Okay, we'll go Omar and then Bob.
I'll make it quick. I think what Joel said hit it head on. I mean, the ARPA dollars will be a Band-Aid, right? This is a longer-term solution that has to happen. I did want to say one comment that the public safety for conventions, obviously you're doing a large expansion of this convention center. It's very important for conventioneers to feel safe, and we have heard that at Visit. It's going to be harder to book conventions if conventioneers don't feel safe, and this is how it all ties in as well.
Well, to that point, if you recall, a couple of years ago, we had a discussion about the Wisconsin Center District, which is a recipient of tax revenue, actually going to a sworn security service, similar to what Marquette did. Marquette went from basically security guards to a fully sworn police force with all the powers of the Milwaukee Police Department and any other state municipal police force in the state of Wisconsin. That was a significant expense for them, but they felt a significant step in assuring the safety, both real and perceived safety, of their customers, namely their students and the students' parents. We had that exact same discussion. And I raised that with you, that the Wisconsin Center District, again, using its tax revenue, which Marquette doesn't even get, using its tax revenue to fund an upgrade to a sworn police force, which would essentially take charge of the areas around this substantial set of facilities and essentially become the police department for West Town and maybe a greater extent downtown, precisely because of the impact on tourism, the impact on hospitality industries, the impact on visitors. And I hope we can rekindle that discussion, because as you see, not only are we not going to increase the size of the Milwaukee Police Department, we could very well be looking at significant reductions in the size of the police department. But again, that's assuming people believe police are important, and there is a segment of the community that says, no, we want to cut the police by 25%. We want to cut them by 75%. We want 900 officers, not 1,600. That's a debate on the policy level, but the finances are irrelevant. We are defunding the police for fiscal reasons anyway, in essence. That is what's going on. Defunding police has become a de facto reality because we do not have revenue streams to support not to support growth, but not even to support maintaining the strength. And unless there are new revenue streams, this is just fact. I mean, I'm taking the politics out of it. This is math. This is mathematics, the law of gravity kind of stuff. If you don't have the revenue, you can't fund the services. And we don't have the revenue, so we can't fund the services. And they happen to be the most expensive services. So in any business context, what do? you start looking at your most expensive category of business operations to start seeing what you can whittle away there. That makes sense. Your most expensive employees, sometimes the ones that are the most vulnerable to layoff, because it's the biggest savings. So this is inevitable, folks, unless there are new revenue streams available to the city of Milwaukee and available pretty soon. Because you're right, I see the direction things are going. I'm in communication with the first district captain, with the chief, acting chief now, hopefully permanent chief. They're very good people, very capable people, but they see the handwriting on the wall. And if we think downtown is going to remain the safest neighborhood in Milwaukee, I truly fear that will be changing, and changing soon. The greatest concentration of car thefts right now in the city of Milwaukee is downtown Milwaukee. That is ground zero for car thefts.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to join Secretary Brennan. I thank Director Yacarino for presenting to us today, and I do want to implore, in particular, the state legislators that are on this board, in particular the Republican state legislators, like Senator Darling and Representative Sanfilippo. We do need to increase the shared revenue to the city of Milwaukee if you want to see this city flourish. If you want to see businesses in the city flourish, we have to increase and give Milwaukee its fair share. And I know in the interim, because we haven't received our fair share of shared revenue for so long, folks like Representative Evan Goyke and now some Republicans are looking to allow us to implement a sales tax. Evan has worked for years and hasn't been able to get it passed. Perhaps this session will see something move, but this is something we can do in the interim as we continue to advocate for our fair share. But again, I'd be remiss to not implore, in particular, Republican members who are elected in the state legislature, but even members of the board who I know perhaps are of a conservative Republican persuasion. We all have to do this together if we want to see the city flourish, if we want to see the Wisconsin Center flourish. Thank you.
Great. Okay.
Can I just
Last word,
add, the
Senator
governor,
Darling.
yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to note that the governor signed the budget. Signed the budget before. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate the discussion and the obvious concerns around and potential issues with safety and security around downtown, which is vital to all of us, right? So thank you for allowing Bob bringing in Dennis, and Dennis, thank you for the update. All right. Last two orders of business, future board meeting dates are in your packet. I think we have them. I think we have one in November. I think we canceled the December one, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
Correct.
And then the 2022 schedule is in there as well. I think we have a modified schedule. We are not currently slated to meet every month, and that may, can be altered from time to time as well. So please stay tuned for all that. With that said, I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Great. Thank you for your attention, and we had a lot to cover today, and we got it done pretty quickly. So thank you.